Hi, Joe Bastillos here with tonight's Final Thought. Going off script again, so we will try to keep the rambling down to a minimum. No guarantees. So in the news, of course, is the leaked photos that have the mainstream media just all over themselves as far as their coverage. And as is typical, one of the best takes on it from a news organization is, of course, the faux news organization, The Daily Show, and Jon Stewart.
How the hell did a hacker steal private photographs? To find out how this was done, you got to go to the experts.
No one knows who did this or exactly how those photos were obtained.
It is not clear who hacked the photos.
Who uploaded those photos?
Who posted the photos?
We know that the data made it onto phones, and we know that the phones stored the photographs. What we don't know is what happened next.
Why are you on my television? Once again, leave watching the news somehow knowing less than when I started. So even the experts can't explain how this happened.
Oh, yes, I could watch Jon Stewart all day, but that would be a copyright violation, and we're not going to do that. So, mainstream media doesn't get it. No one is really surprised there. They're really good at the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But then, I go to my go-to podcast, MacBreak Weekly, and Leo Laporte and gang spent, I want to say, a good 10 minutes just discussing the problems related to these services. What mainstream media didn't talk about was that part of the problem is that using these services is not as easy as it should be. So what does it really come down to? It comes down to that somebody should be able to it always amazes me when somebody finds out what I do, the teaching and the using of the technology and all that sort of stuff, and they almost immediately, if they're not also someone that does what I do, they almost immediately apologize for not being techie. And it always amazes me because it is one of those sorts of things that you should only need to be as techie as whatever it is that you do requires. I had a friend who was a wizard at spreadsheets. She, that's what she did, and she was absolutely amazing at the spreadsheets. Well, that's because that was part of her job. Everything else was a bit of a mystery, but it's just one of those sort of things that should be in keeping with whatever it is that we do. But this whole cloud thing is still a problem. It's still one of I have a master's degree in educational technology. I've been working in technology on some level since 1979. So I consider myself an expert, but lo and behold, even in my own life, I have this little device here that's supposed to allow me to have my own private cloud where I have my files stored here where I live, and then using this little device, I can access them wherever I'm at. But, and it's not really the device's fault necessarily. I live in Florida, and we have the power goes out on occasion, and, we get lightning storms and all that sort of stuff. And so a week ago, well, maybe it was more than a week ago, this little device, the transporter sync, worked. And then this past week, even within my house, it won't let me share my files among my devices. So a big part of the problem that we're having is that, culturally, we are changing from whatever it was we were before to this generation where we've got all these devices that talk and communicate with one another. And the answer is not to go back to the way it once was. That's nostalgic, romantic BS. So let's not think that that's better, because it wasn't better 50 years ago. I don't want to go back to having to use a typewriter and put things on paper, and that's madness. I don't want to, and then going a little bit further, I don't want to save my things on floppy disks or even USB keys and have to run around town to be able to use it on different devices, etc. That to me, that's not a solution. Part of it is, I think part of it is these are just growing pains, and the technology providers have got to find a way for their users to be able to be successful at keeping private things private. If they want to share it, that's another situation. But if it's meant to be private, it should be able to stay private. And that's obviously not an easy thing to do. Just being able to share things isn't an easy thing to do. But then to try to make it so that, it's a very great thing that I can take a photo on my iPhone and not worry if my iPhone takes a swim in a body of water. That whatever it was that was on here has been automatically backed up. That's not a problem. The problem is that if I failed to put a password on my account, and then if I failed to put a good password on my account, and then on top of it, and what makes this an issue for our Hollywood starlets is that obviously they're in the public eye, they're attractive people to begin with, and so you've got that subclass of humans who are going to put enormous amounts of energy to try to steal things that don't belong to them. Those are aberrant behaviors. That is not the norm, and so let's not get our panties in a bunch, as it were, over this problem. It is a problem, and the problem is that we want the benefits of the technology, but it does require certain levels of responsibility on the part of the user and on the part of the vendor, and that's where the failure is. It's not a scandal, and it's not Apple's fault, because all of the manufacturers have similar problems, and it's kind of like one of these sorts of things. This is a perfect storm in that you have these very attractive people using this technology privately, and then you have, like I said, that subclass of human who want something that doesn't belong to them, and it tests the system, and the failure point is that the system isn't as private as it needs to be, or should be, or can be, and so that's something that needs to be worked on. But we shouldn't, suddenly throw the baby out with the bathwater, or assume. Here's the other thing: we shouldn't assume that your stuff and my stuff is also being exposed or leaked or whatever, because it took a concerted effort to do this heinous act, and that effort is not being addressed to the rest of us. Now, does that mean that we're free and clear? No, we still need to be responsible with our stuff. We still need to, have good passwords and have stuff password protected, and the manufacturer still needs to have, exercise their responsibility. But we don't need to throw this stuff out or shame the starlets for having had, nude photos or private. We shouldn't shame them for having private photos. How does that make sense? We need to just kind of back up a little bit, because this stuff is complicated, and it's still not quite, it's out there, and we're using the technology, but it's still not quite ready for prime time. My poor little transporter sink is a perfect example of that. Right now it's downstairs blinking its little red light because it can't quite get its stuff together. And I have a master's degree in this stuff, and but it's still a bit of a mystery. But it's not as bad as they would want you to think it is. It's just hilarious the way the mainstream media has made this all, oh my God. On one extreme, it's the fault of the starlets. On another extreme, we're all being surveilled and go hide your women and children, and it's really neither. The vendors need to continue to improve their product. We as users need to have the brain attached when we're using the stuff, and then the overseers need to do their job as well and not abuse their position. And we're kind of all in this together. I'll end it with this one. I always have to joke also that if this stuff actually did work the way all the vendors promise that it should work, then many of us in the tech field would be out of a job. Because my job, for the most part, is instruction. I'm teaching people how to use this stuff. And if it was as easy as it's supposed to be, then you wouldn't be coming to me to get your degree, and I would have to find something else to do, So we always have to think about that when we complain horrendously about how horrible it is that the world is the way it is. The world is the way it is. We just need to do our part to, move humanity further forward instead of, running about like a bunch of frightened children. That's my final thought for tonight. Catch you next time.